If you found out your dad wasn't your biological father, would you tell him? I noticed the stranger the moment the service started. A man standing alone in the back row wearing a suit that looked like he'd bought it that morning. He wasn't talking to anyone or sitting with family friends. He was just standing there with tears streaming down his face like he'd lost the most important person in his life. I'd never seen him before. The whole service I kept glancing back at him, watching him cry harder than people who'd known my mother for decades, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. When the service ended, I made my way toward him, but the second I approached him, he looked like a deer caught in headlights, and his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come," he said. "Wait, how did you know my mom?" I asked, but he was already rushing out the side door and disappearing into the parking lot. I asked my dad about him later that night, and he just shrugged. "Probably someone from her office," he said. "Maybe that book club she used to go to." He was too deep in his own grief to care about some stranger, but I couldn't stop thinking about the way that man had looked at me, like he was seeing a ghost. A week later, I started going through my mother's things, and that's when I found the box hidden in the back of her closet, behind winter coats she hadn't worn in years. Inside were dozens of letters written in handwriting I didn't recognize, and photographs of my mother as a young woman standing next to a man with his arm around her waist. The man in the photos was younger, but I recognized him immediately. It was the stranger from her funeral. The letters were love letters, the kind of intense and passionate writing you only see from people who have found their soulmate, but they stopped abruptly with no explanation or goodbye. I read through every single one of them looking for answers and found nothing except a return address on the envelopes from an apartment across town. There was no way he still lived there after 25 years, but I had nothing else to go on, so I drove there the next morning just to be sure. The stranger answered the door like he'd been expecting me. "I'm not leaving until you tell me why you were at my mother's funeral," I said. He stared at me for a long moment and then stepped aside to let me in. He made coffee and sat across from me and finally started talking. "My name is Eric," he said. "Your mother and I were engaged 26 years ago." I felt my hands go cold, but I didn't say anything. "We were in love," he continued. "We had everything planned out. The wedding, the house we were going to buy, everything. And then one day she told me it was over." "What do you mean it was over?" I asked. "She said she didn't love me anymore and that she'd met someone else," he said. "3 months later she married your father. I spent years trying to figure out what I did wrong because nothing between us had changed. One day she loved me and the next day she was gone." He began to cry. "She called me about a year before she got sick," he said. "She told me she was finally ready to tell me the truth." "What truth?" I asked. Julian took a deep breath. "She said she ended things because she found out she was pregnant. She panicked and assumed the baby belonged to another man she'd been seeing, your father, so she felt like she had no choice but to marry him. She said she was ashamed and scared and she didn't know what else to do." I sat there trying to process this. Then Eric pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "She sent me this a few weeks before she died," he said. Inside was a DNA test and a letter in my mother's handwriting. "I don't understand," I said. "Read it," he told me. My mom's handwriting unraveled across the page. "Eric, this doubt has been destroying me for years. I did a DNA test and it confirmed what I've been terrified of since the day my son was born. You're his biological father. I made the wrong choice. I married the wrong man. You have a son." I couldn't believe what I was reading. "She made me promise not to say anything unless you came looking for answers on your own." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "She wanted me to meet you, but only if you wanted to meet me." I drove home in complete silence with the DNA test sitting on my passenger seat. When I walked through the door, my dad was in the living room waiting up for me. The same man who taught me to ride a bike and stayed by my mother's hospital bed until her very last breath. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just hugged him and held on for a long time. I decided that night that some secrets are better off buried with the people who kept them.